The Path of Return by Saint Germain. Introduction. Beyond time and space, beyond human and divine consciousness, beyond all that is conceivable, resides the source from which all life has emanated. And we, echoes of a creation generated eons of time ago, only perceive what resembles ourselves and are unable to perceive that which is essentially different. On the path of return, we shall encounter traces of our past forgotten by time, which erases the footprints of ancient experiences. Recognizing that slender thread of energetic flows, which we traversed until reaching the final point of our manifestation and returning to the source from which we departed, is a deeply esoteric task and the culmination of all the efforts which, as initiates, have been undertaken by all the great men of this humanity. Today I wish to visit you, because on the path of return, many are the teachings that must be discovered, many the secrets that are to be revealed, many the memories that are to be studied. I invite you, with the discipline proper to initiates, with an open mind to all the surprises this path brings with it, to embark on that adventure which began in time immemorial, when we were all emanated from the pristine source of the river of life. This will be a series we shall call The Path of Return, a reunion with ourselves, a looking back and rediscovering what we have been, a return to the primary causes that originated a manifold universe strewn with mysteries. In future sessions we will work on this chapter, and together we shall bring about the gradual revelation of the arcana enclosed within the footprints of the past. Some of the concepts we mention here have been studied previously in some of the received series. I suggest that, as you progress, you review those earlier series in order to perfectly understand the idea we wish to convey. Chapter 1. What is the path of return? We are to speak of a path of return, but a return to where? To whom? How? The questions may be intuited, but the answers merge into a single one. It is the return to the origin, to the starting point, to that mysterious center from which all the creatures of the universe once emerged in emanations. Manifestation of the human seed. And the human being, in search of a plane of manifestation, had to descend from plane to plane until reaching the necessary density that could be harmoniously complemented to achieve a totality of manifestation, and that was the physical realm, the world of forms. Their essence brought about changes on the surface of the planet. Their energy modified the environment and molded a body of manifestation. The animal kingdom responded to this stimulus, producing a mold from which the progenitors of the race emerged, carrying the characteristics proper to intelligent life. Evolution and natural selection. The original mold gradually varied until it was better adapted to the conditions in which it unfolded. This they called evolution, and later, they called the innate capacity to better adapt to environmental conditions the principle of natural selection. Man was then enclosed within the mold, and the memory of his divine origin became lost in the remote past, in the very depths of the essence he manifested. And the perfection of the mold was such that it developed its own consciousness, accumulated its own memories, and a race of sleeping beings was formed. The sleep of unconsciousness. Meanwhile, the divine sparks, the originators of this entire evolutionary impulse, remained in latency, awaiting the moment for their full awakening. The molds became aware of themselves, and their human reasoning silenced the voices that came from their own spiritual heavens. The sweet sleep of unconsciousness then took possession of the human race, lulling to sleep all those memories that kept alive the desire for return. The appearance of the mind and physical senses sharpened, and the brain created minds, and those minds responded to the impulses of the physical world, manufacturing a reality that responded solely to the three-dimensional world. and what had previously been necessary to protect the scarce members of the newly formed human colony later became the most significant obstacle to be overcome by all those who yearned for spiritual freedom. The instincts of survival, so vital in the early stages of man, strengthened human consciousness to such an extent that divine impulses had to fall silent. And man forgot his past, his origin, and his mission, embarking on an adventure that, even today, has not yet ended. What, then, is the path of return? It is a delving into the causes that brought about forgetfulness. It is a scrutinizing of the voices that speak from deep within. It is a rediscovering of the essence that has been forgotten. It is a retracing of the steps that have inclined man toward the realm of forms, to direct him once again toward the realm of essences. This is the path we propose to explain. It goes without saying that understanding these concepts does not necessarily lead to the rediscovery of oneself, and that discussing and participating in these teachings can never substitute for the personal investigation that each person must conduct within themselves. We will show the door. Each one must open it. Each one must walk. Each one must work on their own return. I hope these instructions serve as the motivating force you need to follow the impulse you began long ago. The Path of Return. Chapter 2. The Collective Unconscious and the Formation of the Areas of Personality. Upon entering the planet, the human being underwent a series of transformations that gave rise to human consciousness. We must understand that divine consciousness possesses different attributes, and that human consciousness arises from the interaction between divine consciousness and the experiences of the physical world. In the beginning of the establishment of the human race, divine consciousness was completely asleep and remained in a state of latency. Its stimuli worked exclusively through the rudimentary physical apparatus in which it had incarnated. Effects of energy on the first human organisms. Let us remember that these physical bodies came from the most advanced species in existence at that time. Upon contact with spiritual energy, anatomical transformations were not long in coming. All this was due to the fact that the energies originating from the human seed interacted with the energetic flows circulating within this rudimentary organism. With the activation of the chakras, which likewise had remained mostly in a state of latency, a response was triggered at the glandular level. Indeed, modifications had to occur in the glands of those early physical organisms. All of this was part of the effort to build a suitable body for the new manifestation that was to take place. Once the glandular system was activated, changes in the anatomy of the organisms manifested. Differences between divine consciousness and human consciousness. Divine consciousness does not work in a manner similar to the human one. Divine consciousness cannot err. It does not operate on the basis of reasoning, it does not make deductions, and it does not accumulate experiences through association as human consciousness does. Divine consciousness is pure, diaphanous light. It works exclusively in fulfillment of the principles of divine laws. It does not maintain a separate consciousness of the self, and it does not possess free will in the sense that it is understood on earth. Divine consciousness is not separate from God and, for this very reason, it is correct to assert that divine consciousness is God Himself working within matter. A part of that consciousness was placed within each of the primary organisms. The physical experiences that each of those first individuals began to accumulate gave rise to fragmented, separate human consciousnesses, containing the germ of free will that would later characterize human consciousness. Thus, in the beginning, human beings, although primitive, maintained a unity of consciousness. Their body of manifestation perhaps did not allow them much freedom, but in principle they behaved just as many organisms of the animal kingdom do now, following only what has come to be called instinct, which is nothing other than the behavioral response to the divine stimuli they have inherited from their own race. Formation of the areas of personality. The experiences that man accumulated lacked order. There was no pattern under which they could be associated, and for this reason, it took a long time for the human mind to form. However, this is where the importance of divine consciousness lies, as explained previously. The areas of personality are formed on the basis of chains of experience linked to one another, on the basis of the similarity of emotions experienced by the human being. In this way, each individual maintains different areas of personality, which in their entirety constitute their personality as perceived by man. First, associative chains. But where were those chains initiated? In experience. If we were to take a person of this time, we would understand that those areas of personality have common starting points, those initial experiences that serve as anchors so that later the human mind itself can begin to associate experiences with each of them. These incoming experiences are fixed based on certain factors that the human being has inherited from their ancestors. Perhaps the first great classification that the human being makes is pain and pleasure. The first anchor is pain, and one seeks to flee from everything that causes pain. We are speaking of the earliest stages of infancy. The other anchor is pleasure, and all those experiences that convey pleasure to the child will be associated with this first experience. From then on, the child's mind will make subdivisions, gradually forming the different areas of personality that make each individual unique. The collective unconscious and the formation of anchors. But where did those first anchors come from? How did they reach the child's mind? The mystery lies within the collective unconscious, that energetic entity that the human race has been building since the beginning of its existence. The collective unconscious provides the anchors in the minds of individuals, which will serve as the basis for the creation of the different areas of personality of each human being. Now, if we were to look for the causes of causes, the anchors of anchors, we would reach those first days when human consciousness was forming in the first men, and those first causes reside in the divine consciousnesses that were sown in the first men. Divine consciousnesses provided the first anchors that served as a foundation for the minds of men to begin to form and to associate experiences with those first, entirely divine precepts. And what were those precepts? What were the causes of causes? It is not easy to imagine that the divine mind, being so different from its daughter, human consciousness, could hold the secret of man's existence on earth. Divine consciousness manifested the laws by which all human beings were created, which, as we have already said, are the same laws under which the stars and galaxies were created. Those primordial anchors are precisely the divine laws, which remained locked within human consciousness behind the entire accumulation of experiences that, as a species, have been accumulating generation after generation. Every child born at this moment is born with the anchors that the human race has passed down to them. The collective unconscious provides them with the first starting points that will allow them to mature their human consciousness and frame it according to those patterns contributed by the generations that have preceded them. The path of return leads us to the origin of life. But behind all of that, behind the history of humanity, behind the very evolution of the race, lie the mysteries that gave rise to life, and not only to the life of man, but to the creation of the universe. Therefore, it is important to understand that the path of return is a path that leads to the origin of the river of life, to the origin of man's appearance on earth. I will leave these concepts here for you to meditate upon, and once again I suggest that you carefully study what has already been said about the areas of personality and how human consciousness was formed in the course of history. Chapter 3. The path of return to the origin of the universe. the impact of the human being's first experiences. We were saying that human beings form the different aspects of their personality through associative chains of experiences they accumulate throughout life. Necessarily, those chains of life must begin in some childhood experience. We mentioned that the first great division, in terms of the experiences the child has, is through pleasure and pain. The first associations are made starting from that first classification, and from there, the child's mind will refine the classifications until it forms a great tree where experiences are arranged alongside those to which they are most closely related. Each of the branches of the tree will represent an aspect of the personality, within which the mature human being can function with a certain degree of psychological integrity. But those first anchors or experiences, with which the rest of what the child experiences are associated, are provided in the first instance by the instincts inherited from their nature, and in the second instance by others inherited from the collective unconscious. Moral values and those others which, on intuitive levels, allow the child to understand what is right or wrong, what is in accordance with their nature or what goes against it, all belong to the heritage that the human race has been building since the beginning of existence. Organic memory and mental memory. Now, the collective unconscious also had its genesis, and this genesis dates back to the first moments when the human being manifested as such on Earth, in those early years when human consciousness was forming, and where associative chains could not be built, primarily because experiences were accumulated solely in a physical memory, in an organic memory and not in a mental memory. To distinguish between these two memories, it is enough to understand that organic memory manifests through its defense mechanisms. Stimuli produce responses in man's sensory apparatus, and these responses are the result of the organic memory of the physical body, whereas mental memory is formed through other types of mechanisms, those derived from reasoning, from conclusions. They are the result of mental work, of a work of ideas, of a work of associations in which a moral structure is implicitly built. The first anchors and the destiny of man. These first mental vibrations were gradually imprinted upon the psychic atmosphere of the planet. In those years, all of this was untouched. The psychic substance was simply there, ready to be molded, ready to be worked. In those early days, human beings began to shape it, and little by little they built what we know today as the collective unconscious. Now, within the occult work of humanity's initiates, an important aspect is being able to walk the path of return, the way back to the Father. The interest in finding those first anchors from which the associations that human beings build throughout their lives originated lies in the fact that these initial anchors were provided to newly incarnated human beings. Those first starting points, beneath which were hung all the concepts and experiences that human beings accumulated during their earliest experiences, constitute the laws under which man was created and, of course, hold the secret of man's mission on Earth. In fact, they make up the plan for human evolution, not only on a biological level but even on a psychic and spiritual one. How do we reach the starting point? But the collective unconscious is the substance that surrounds the mind of man. It is like being in the middle of a great city crowded with signs pointing to highly diverse places where we try to find our way back. We find ourselves submerged in labyrinths of theories, philosophies, trends, and concepts that lead to undoubtedly interesting places, but perhaps not to the primal source we wish to reach. In his search, man encounters endless methods, books, and authors, all expressing their personal experiences and adding more confusion to that which already exists. It is not, then, by opening our eyes and searching for what others have found in the external world that we can reach the starting point, but rather by searching for the secret path locked within ourselves, seeking to find the pillars upon which our own particular subjective world was built. Each man constructs his own interpretation of the real world. One is the world of facts, the objective, the real, and quite another is the world perceived by the human being, a world of interpretations, a world colored by the mental filters manufactured by each individual. It is in this subjective world where the secret of man on earth resides. To attempt to seek divine keys on the outside is to open our eyes to the labyrinth and lose ourselves in the interpretations and visions of so many other lost travelers. The path of return must therefore be walked internally, searching for the roots of our own personality, finding the inheritances of the collective unconscious within us, journeying even further back to search in the mists of time for how this collective unconscious was constructed, in order to finally arrive at the keys we inherited as part of a divine consciousness, unmistakable characteristics of how the entire universe was built. Chapter 4. The Collective Unconscious. Formation of the Collective Unconscious. The path of return is, without a doubt, one of the great tasks that humanity has undertaken since the beginning of its manifestation on Earth. We have journeyed from those first moments when human consciousness became individualized, and we have seen how its earliest experiences laid the foundations of what would later become its associative chains, upon which the current collective unconscious would be established. With the passage of generations, the thoughts that human beings emitted and sent toward this collective unconscious in every era gradually matured it, to the point of becoming what it is today. This atmosphere of human thoughts has been shaped over thousands of years. The energy of the collective unconscious and its effect on the human being. Every human being possesses within their brain the capacity to take the matter of this psychic atmosphere, rework it, and integrate it once again into this great collective unconscious. The way this occurs is simply through the frontal chakra. It absorbs the energies coming from its immediate surroundings, inhales them, assimilates them, impregnates them with its own energies, and subsequently exhales them. As it passes through the human energetic organism, this assimilated energy triggers a series of experiences accumulated in the person's mind, giving rise to thought. The way each person's memories or experiences are selected has to do with the nature of the energy being inhaled by the being, in conjunction with the vibration that the person themselves is generating at that moment. From the combination of these two energies, certain regions of the brain are activated, triggering memories and giving the impression of new thoughts. The pathways that trigger memories within the mind of man have different activation frequencies. Thus, certain areas are activated with high-frequency energies, one could say, those that produce the most elevated, harmonious, or spiritual memories, while others are activated by lower frequencies, which we might identify as those that are painful for the human being. The crown chakra and high frequencies. Thus, these pathways are activated or deactivated depending on the vibrational frequency of the human being, and of course on the energy surrounding them. When an individual has worked on themselves and succeeded in raising their vibrational frequency, the chakra that is activated is the crown chakra. When this occurs, the activation of the crown chakra automatically tunes the human being to the high frequencies of space. This allows them to be in contact with energies of a much higher order, and in this way, they remain impervious to the lower frequency energies that prevail in the planet's collective unconscious. The greater the inner work, the greater the activity of the crown chakra. Consequently, the human being will continuously think in a positive way, because their axons will be activated by high frequencies, unleashing memories that are solely pleasant or spiritual for the human being. With the activation of the crown chakra, new capacities are acquired, allowing man to analyze the collective unconscious from a panoramic viewpoint, free from its very influence. That is, the human being acquires the capacity to discover the root causes of this great psychic atmosphere enveloping the planet. Knowledge of it allows the human being to glimpse the very nature of humanity, the mysteries of personality, as well as its genesis, transformations, and future. For all these reasons, it is recommended that, in your meditations, you incessantly practice this inner search to find the causes of the manifestations of your current personality. The origin of our personality. As we have mentioned previously, each of you must seek the cause of the causes of your current personality, and by thus discovering your innermost motivations, you will be able to reach the very source from which your childhood mind was nourished. This will place you in a privileged position to understand the complex psychic structure possessed by human beings. By way of practical instructions, we might recommend the following. Make a list of your most important desires for your current life, and once you have found them, and they truly reflect your personal searches, your most intense desires, that which motivates all your actions, then begin to ask yourselves why and for what purpose you wish to achieve what you have written down. Once you answer those questions, ask yourselves again why or for what purpose you desire that other thing, and so, in an endless questioning of the why or what purpose of what you are writing, you will be able to travel the path back toward your innermost world. This exercise will allow you to discover areas of your personality that normally remain hidden from the conscious mind. Work on this exercise, and in the next chapter we will be prepared to penetrate deeper and deeper into those mysteries that lead us to the path of return. Chapter 5. The Seeds of Evolution. The path of return is the path of the seeds, the path that traverses each stage of evolution to gradually understand the distinct processes through which a spiritual being is transformed until achieving the complete fulfillment of its mission as a divine creature. Observing human beings move individually within a unified collective mission is a spectacle worthy of appreciation by all spiritual minds. Understanding that within the diversity of functions there coordinately exists a single purpose is a clear manifestation of universal harmony manifesting in each of the different stages of evolution. The process of evolution of the human psyche. A brief historical review of the evolution of man allows us to understand that just as his psyche has evolved and transformed, from a psyche with merely individual interests to another where the collective is already part of his objectives as an evolving being, it is also something that shows us how the expansion of consciousness is undoubtedly the determining note in the evolution of all created beings. All of man's knowledge began with a few isolated seeds, experiences accumulated by isolated individuals who, in turn, transmitted them to their offspring, becoming part of a heritage of knowledge that expanded and magnified as the individual experiences of each generation were added. Thus, we could say that, by analogy, it is as if a few lights began to turn on, each with different colors, their luminous beams intermingling and forming multiple combinations as they project forward into infinity. The castle of human knowledge. In the same way, man's knowledge has been expanding. A few individual ideas began to project through humanity's offspring and began to form the great castle of human knowledge, each generation adding its accumulated experiences to those of its predecessors. However, the pristine sources of light remain latent as the causes of everything that has accumulated over time. And when we speak of knowledge, we do not refer only to intellectual concepts. We also refer to the beliefs that were sown in the psyche of men by that curious interaction between normal survival instincts and the tendencies that the spiritual seed allowed to manifest in those first physical bodies in which it was incarnating. And humanity continued adding bricks to the already vast castle of knowledge. And here we are, thousands of years later, trying to find, in the midst of this wonderful and immense castle of knowledge, those places where the seeds from which everything started were hidden. Secret chambers located at some hidden point in the basements of this castle are what will provide the keys, the guidelines, and the principles that will allow us not only to clear the path of return, but also the future projections that humanity will continue to chart over the course of its history. Searching for the hidden seeds. It is not words we are looking for, nor scientific or psychological concepts. They are concepts enclosed before reasoning was present in the minds of men, before a formal language appeared. They are experiences based on images, based on contrasts of light, based on emotions generated in those early stages, when animal tendencies intermingled with the human inclinations of the seed that was beginning to germinate. What is it, then, that we are looking for? How can we clear a path that leads to the very source from which we departed as a race? The eyes that observe history are not the same eyes as those that wrote it. On this journey backward, we will observe but not participate. We will understand but not experience. We will relive history, discovering it at the very roots of our own race, but not as part of an evolutionary process, not as part of reliving things already transcended, but as spectators eager to understand the causes that gave rise to the evolution of man. We will understand the whys behind the appearance of so many tendencies that we have manifested as human beings, and at some point in the not-too-distant future, we will locate those secret places that formed the cornerstones supporting the grand edifice of civilization. The imprint of each civilization. For now, I want you to draw the following analogy in your minds. The first men laid the foundations of this castle, and each generation provided the elements and details of the castle's subsequent stages. As the castle has been built, its configuration, materials, and concepts have changed. In its path, each society has imprinted its own seal and its own architecture on the castle. At the summit, the building of what this current civilization is manifesting is constructed. Synthetic materials, a civilization fundamentally geared toward material well-being. A society that wishes to awaken to a spiritual one but fails to register such knowledge within the formal framework of the sciences. It feels the call but has not found the appropriate manifestation to imprint itself as part of the formal education of man. The society of plastic and oil, the society of currency and the atom, these are the ingredients with which the latest stage of the building is being constructed. But go backward, and you will find other floors, other walls, other constructions formed by different aspirations of human beings, illuminated at times with mystical emotions, and at others with merely warlike emotions. You will find floors full of corruption, and others where the beauty of art is breathed in every corner. Continue descending the staircases of this great castle, and you will find passages that lead you to dark and confusing places, while others will take you along the paths of art and music. Each society has left its personality imprinted on the different floors of this castle. Continue making your way down the stairs and, just like in a great museum, you will observe on the walls, in the paintings, in the furniture, the fruits of each of the generations that have preceded you. And at the bottom, in the basements of the castle, there where the light selfishly hides, where it will be necessary to kindle the light of the Spirit, we will be able to find the keys to what we are looking for. Chapter 6. The Path of History and the Causes of Man. We speak of the path of return, of this process that gradually leads us to understand the seed that humanity sowed in the past, which, having now germinated, shapes its material and spiritual reality. We have mentioned that over the centuries human beings have transformed their customs, their morals, their way of socializing, their needs, their language, their thoughts, their feelings, their way of living, and that even anatomical changes have developed. we must understand that the human being is the result of the very forces that he has set in motion in past eras. 2 ways to study humanity. We must understand that all the forces that combine to result in a society act in a synergistic manner. That is, the combined effects produce results that are difficult to predict from a simple analysis. When the sum of 1 plus 1 is greater than 2, or when the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, we say that a synergistic effect exists. This phenomenon occurs continuously in nature, where the combined effects of several factors produce results that cannot be analyzed by considering each of the factors separately. Thus, if man is studied solely through the influence that his religion has had on him, we could not explain what society has created. If we sought to understand man solely through technological advances, we could not explain the direction that humanity has taken either. If we studied man solely through the changes his environment has undergone, we could not explain his behavior either. And yet, when we combine all these factors, the situation becomes more complex. And it is in this study that the keys reside which allow us to find the reasons behind the development and behavior of man. Seeking, then, to predict the future of a humanity that is the result of not 4 or 5 factors, but of a multitude of factors, becomes an exceedingly titanic task, and one with highly questionable results. However, when we look back toward the past, when we seek the causes, it is possible to understand the roots of history, because once the path has been walked, it is easily retraced through the manifestations that history itself shows us. Reading man's different evolutionary processes in the past. Within the psyche of man reside the important motivations that have given rise to the different courses that societies have taken throughout history. We must therefore study the development of the human psyche and understand that, since the psyche is the result of man's material and spiritual needs, we can sketch, as if on a canvas, the way in which human beings have made their decisions. Thus, we can find that in periods of historical crisis, moral values have shown decline, spiritual values have receded, and material needs have been by far the primary determinants of the course of history. Yet, we can also see that in those peoples where peace reigned, where the fundamental needs of the body had been satisfied, the human spirit was able to soar and rise to the heights of the spirit. There, it is possible to observe a rebirth, great movements in the arts and sciences. The lack of communication and the isolation of different peoples allow us to study civilizations separated from one another and to study the processes of their evolution and decline. This will allow us to attempt, on a small scale, to explain the distinct processes of human evolution, so that when we later want to scale these same conclusions and transfer them to a universal framework, we can be certain that the same process occurring at the level of a small society occurs equally at the macrosocial level. Planning the future of peoples. What are the factors or elements that allow the creation of great empires, of great societies? A sense of identity, unity of purpose, the definition of a course, factors that are present only when a society concerns itself with remembering its ancestors, maintaining its traditions, and synthesizing the needs of a defined future, such as the need for provisions, which arise not as the result of natural selection, but as part of a projection spiritually planned by the guides of the race. For the future of a people and of humanity cannot be left in the hands of nature. It must be planned, carefully considered, and the divine will, always exercised by the mentors of the race, becomes the beacon that determines the course of history. Man struggles for his identity. On this path of return, look for the sense of identity among different peoples, what purposes unified the wills of individuals, what goals they fought for, and you will gradually begin to understand the nature of man's psyche. Remember, there was a time when man fought for divine purposes. His wars were holy, religious wars, seeking intangible values. But there was another time when the primary pursuit was the satisfaction of material needs, wealth, power, possessions. There were those who fought to defend their land because it was more to them than just a means of subsistence. It was their very identity. It was the people recognizing in that land the repository of the ashes of their ancestors. Wherever the roots grow, your people will grow, and their seed will populate the world. Those were the words of some ancient sages of America. Immerse yourselves in the reasons behind the struggle between races. Understand the anguish of a people when they feel they are losing their historical values, their religious beliefs. Penetrate deep into the minds of those colonizers who fought to aggrandize a crown, a kingdom, a nation, a garb. The clash of consciousness of the first evangelizers whose hearts were inflamed by the divine word and who arrived to educate poor Indians submerged in pagan beliefs. Observe with the eye of the spirit those peoples who could never be subdued. The proud English spirit, the savagery of the Arab races, the immemorial hatreds between the Jews and the Arab peoples, the peaceful Eastern civilization that at one time clashed in blood with other peoples of their same races. Walk the path backward and understand the changing needs of a spirit that seeks to manifest its divine essence amidst human consciousnesses, which have been changing over the course of centuries. Chapter 7. Religious Archaeology. On our path of return, we have analyzed the different stages through which the human psyche has passed. We have described the dawn of civilization and how the edifice of moral precepts was built from its foundations to the present day. We have provided keys that likewise allow us to peer into history and capture not only the facts, but the motivations hidden behind the events. We have applied the mind not only to reason, but to intuit those events in human consciousness that were key to determining the routes history would follow. Thus, through this study, so diverse in both the subjects it comprises and the methods it applies, we have been able to draw back slightly the curtain that conceals true human evolution. Lines of inquiry. The same end. However, the path of return is a real path. It is neither symbolic nor utopian. It is a path that must be traversed by all those who yearn to once again establish contact with their divine origin. True, it is not the only method by which this result can be achieved, but our purpose is to establish lines of inquiry, and we speak not for one man or a group, but for all of humanity. Each series, each theme, each set of messages are keys that open different doors, all of them leading to the same goal, yet dedicated to different types of men, with different concerns and capabilities, with different objectives and motivations. The psychic heritage and the spiritual heritage. The journey of consciousness beyond the basic beliefs accumulated in personal experience is a journey through the collective unconscious, the undeniable heritage of present-day humanity, inherited from the generations that preceded it. The biological inheritance of modern man is likewise the fruit of learning that nature itself has accumulated over thousands upon thousands of years in certain specialized cells. This constitutes the memory of the physical body. Science has already begun its journey toward the origins of life, and its effort is undoubtedly valuable for all those initiates interested in traversing the path of return. The earliest beliefs. Yet, just as psyche on one hand and genetics on the other describe two processes through which man has passed, so too must we appeal to another science, something we might call religious archaeology, seeking to uncover the earliest beliefs of a religious nature, arising perhaps from the fear of the unknown or from that intuitive certainty that man has always possessed of being the fruit of a creator. Even though we have already explored the very origins of religion, it is pertinent to mention that when man was able to fashion a physical organ capable of giving form to spiritual ideas, When the human brain became capable of giving body to those ideas originating in his higher vehicles, language emerged as a result, and one of his first concerns was to please the gods. The concept of a supernatural, divine force or superior beings arose in the human mind in a natural way. Their spiritual contacts with luminous beings and occasional physical contacts with cosmic seers resulted in the generation of traditions where superior beings, the children of the stars, the gods, were worshipped. Man recognized them as his parents, and man felt proud because the original message to them was that, at some point in their history, they must return once more to their place of origin. This is why man knew that he came from heaven, that his seed had been sown on earth, that his evolution was watched over by the elder brothers, and, to some extent, they knew their mission. Perhaps his physical body was too imperfect to create impressive things, but his higher bodies remained in contact with his brothers from space. And this is why legends of peoples with divine, solar, or stellar origins have survived to this day. In Japan, the Egyptians, the Incas, and many others recognized their extraterrestrial origin, traditions that recall the distant teachings of divine ancestors. The traditions, and within our religious archaeology, the study of current traditions is important, wherein perhaps, behind the concepts embellished by multiple repetitions over so many generations, lie the fundamental truths that tell us of man's first basic beliefs. This study, if carried out seriously, will allow researchers to link pasts so distant and peoples so geographically separated that a single origin can be found. Far from trying to explain this as the effect of multiple migrations undertaken by nomadic peoples at the beginning of their history, it should be understood as a normal process in which a newborn humanity remains in contact with those who are its mentors. Not everything in the history of peoples can be explained by the mixing of their races. We must also look for the laws and principles that seem to govern all these traditions. By setting aside the natural distortions resulting from the evolution of languages and focusing solely on the essential concepts of each tradition, it is possible to find common ground, link them, and seek to explain them as processes that obey higher cosmic laws rather than merely as the fruit of journeys and conquests made by the ancestors of those peoples. The flashes of intuition that strike the minds of researchers will become more and more frequent the deeper they delve into the serious study of these subjects. Recommendations to researchers. The awakening of the memories of the race will be the result of an inspired investigation guided by all these themes we have been revealing. Search with the eagerness of initiates. Go beyond the simplistic interpretations of orthodox historians. There are books that approach history from more daring, more spiritual, and more open-minded perspectives. Identify these authors, for they will be the ones to show the first steps of this research. Remember that what we pursue is superfluous to the majority of human beings, but it is extremely important for the evolution and understanding of our spiritual past. Chapter 8. The Keys to Return. Genetic Research. We have been discussing many things about the path of return. We have been giving keys, practices, and concepts that allow you to retrace the path of return to the source of origin. It is not an evolutionary regression that we intend with these practices. We are in the process of the reflux back toward the consciousness of the Father. From that place we once flowed, arriving in our continuous descent to the virgin lands of the material realm of this planet. Now corresponds the stage of contraction, of reflux, of the place of return. The experiences of consciousness. It is time to focus our attention on the river of life from which we emerged. Therefore, on this path of return, consciousness will keep as its exclusive heritage all the experiences assimilated throughout its spiritual history. It is not a step backward in time. It is a return to the Father's house after a long journey of work and instruction. And of this I wish to speak to you again. Among the keys of the return that have been mentioned throughout the series, there are others that we must likewise address, but which I first prefer to divide into three forms: physical keys, soul keys, and intuitional keys. The physical keys. Physical keys are those that allow us, from the physical plane, to seek the clues that lead us back centuries, to the point where human consciousness was germinal, when that consciousness, in its embryonic stage, began to accumulate experience upon experience, eventually shaping what is known today as the human subconscious. And what are these physical keys? Previously, we mentioned that the systematic study of the history and sociology of peoples could give us clues about them. We also commented that the essence of legends and folk tales often contained episodes that were highly revealing of the consciousness of distant eras. Genetic inheritance. Physical clues go even further. It is possible to decipher the keys of inheritance within the human organism and still find, lost among the millions of cells of each organism, some gene containing the information of those first humans who populated the Earth. These genes have not disappeared, but rather exist in a latent state, located within some of the millions of cells that man possesses. They are recessive and therefore do not manifest themselves. However, they remain accessible for when science becomes capable of reading the genetic codes of the human being and understanding the information they carry encoded. Every man carries the history of humanity stored within his genetic inheritance. The mysterious and deeply spiritual reason for this has to do with the earliest stages of birth. During the 9 months of gestation, these genes remain active, but afterwards, once the future child has been completely formed in its physical stage, the genes automatically become recessive, feeling that their role has ended and giving way to the individual's new genetic inheritance, that which will determine both their personality and their anatomy. Psychic paleontology. Physical clues have to do with everything pertaining to the three-dimensional world, to matter and its interaction with the human being. The earth itself speaks to us of its past. The study of ancient peoples could be fully revealed if we were capable of reading the messages that nature itself has kept safeguarded. Mountains with their small hollows, caves, and geological depressions store information in the same way a voice recorder does, and a person with sufficient physical training can make contact with this information using the index fingers of both hands, one placed on the rock of the site to be studied, and the other placed on the space between the eyebrows. The rest of the fingers will close into a fist, and contact will be maintained by focusing attention on both fingers simultaneously, allowing the mind to recreate images and beginning, through repeated practice, to master the supreme art of psychic paleontology. The thoughts will be absorbed by the student's mind, who must, at the end of the session, take a bath, preferably in running water, to prevent these energies from unbalancing their energy fields. Ancient cities, ruins, and those places surrounded by mountains that feature caves or rock cavities, where one can reach and establish this type of contact, constitute perfect locations for this type of practice. People who lack psychic perception will see their sensitivity increase through this practice, while those who already possess certain psychic faculties will find these practices astonishing, as the images will be recreated in their brains in a faithful and exact manner, just as they occurred. Chapter 9. Astral Research. In the search for our roots, there are aspects as mysterious as they are interesting. Traces of the past that reach our present day transformed into cosmic signals. Ever since humanity made its appearance on Earth, it has been indelibly engraving its presence upon the cosmos. The records of humanity, and each of the different stages that humanity passed through to build its history has been permanently recorded, and these events can be read by intuitive minds that have gained access to these records, which are considered secret by all of us. Having these secret books at humanity's disposal would represent a risk that, for the moment, we do not wish to take. There exist in humanity's past certain pages whose knowledge in present times could lead to crises similar to those already experienced, with the compounding factor that modern technology could make them even more devastating. Some discoveries, which have been erased by the passage of centuries, could likewise now serve as a springboard to reach new levels of technology. For these and other reasons, these records are kept hidden. However, for those trained minds, for those beings who have dedicated themselves to the study of humanity as an evolving spiritual entity, secrets do not exist, and all of this can be revealed. My words in this lesson are dedicated precisely to those serious researchers of humanity's past. The inner search. Several times throughout this series, I have repeated that the search for external signs, the search for the traces of past civilizations, is nothing but a pretext for man to internally walk his own history of humanity. Any record, monument, legend, or tale that reveals clues of a past will be nothing more than an instrument for the initiate to learn to recognize these same traces within himself. We do not intend to cultivate encyclopedists. We seek to awaken the memory of humanity, but within each of you. Thus, the consultation of each of these archives is earned once the initiate has expressed his desire and shown his ability to traverse, within himself, each of the stages through which humanity has passed. The revelations. When the researcher has found a clue, his desire and his very evolutionary nature allow him to access these archives. Then, through a mechanism that could be called revelation or intuition, the key pieces of his own puzzle are clarified, the path is smoothed, and, momentarily, the initiate finds himself experiencing illumination. This phenomenon drives him to continue the search, to go further in his work. Once again he reviews the traces of the past. Once again he turns his eyes toward the ruins, the sacred writings, or nature itself, and then, in his personal methodology, which undoubtedly includes the science of analogies, he seeks outside what he carries inside, deciphering the clues in the external world in order to later discover them within his own inner being. And when once again one of the pieces is missing, when once again the plot of history is incomplete, he returns to his inner search, and through that mechanism somewhere between revelation and intuition, he manages to move forward, discovering the missing piece. Once the enigma is resolved internally, the external history is likewise resolved, and the method continues. Seeking outside what one has inside, to later identify the traces in one's own inner being of what was already found in the external world. The past is read in the fruits of the civilizations that have preceded us, but when we close our eyes to the external, the voices of our past begin to be heard, and it is possible to internally discover the echoes of the indigenous peoples of all the races that have populated this planet before our own. The voice of the past. It is possible to hear the native peoples singing their dances within us. It is possible to hear the cries of the Vikings at the moment of launching themselves into battle. It is possible to discover the sacred mantras recited by the Egyptians when they prayed to their god Ra. And it is equally possible to find, in some corner of our consciousness, the longings and aspirations of those natives who once departed on a long pilgrimage, searching for an islet where an eagle would be perched, devouring a serpent. The past speaks within us, but we must listen to it. It is a mystical journey, undoubtedly, but one modulated by the occultist research carried out on the recorded past and the traces left in nature itself. How can we initiate that inner meditation that allows us to reveal the secrets of our inner being, analogous to the historical passages we study externally? Remember, every previous generation has left its footprints in the genetic memory of the body. Search for objects from that era, touch them with your hands, touch them with your mind, immerse yourselves in meditation and dream of the eras in which those men lived, and relive them without the intervention of reasoning, without directing your own meditation. Let your mind recreate moments that were truly lived by those ancient inhabitants. Perhaps at first you will require great perseverance, but once the keys begin to reveal themselves, the rest of the path will be easily traveled. This is where I will leave my words for today. I sincerely hope that these writings motivate serious researchers to begin a quest that will allow them to return more quickly to the source from which we all set out. Chapter 10. The Starting Point. With this communication, I want to close the series on the path of return. After this, only a few concepts will remain, which we will summarize briefly by way of farewell in some future session. I return to the starting point. For today, I would like you to consider the following analogy. If a human being were to set out in a straight line on a long journey over the surface of the earth, there would come a moment when, without ever turning back, their steps would lead them to the point from which they departed. That is to say, a traveler always walking forward without ever turning back would reach the point from which they once set out. In the universe it is the same. A traveler leaving some point in the universe and always traveling in a straight line will eventually return to the starting point. Having once emerged from the bosom of God and without ceasing to evolve for a single instant, man will undoubtedly return to God. And the analogy becomes clearer when we understand that the entire universe moves in terms of cycles, in periods of expansion and contraction, in periods of ebb and flow. The path of return is not a retracing of steps, a backward movement in the evolution that has brought man to where he currently finds himself. The path we have outlined is the path that passes through self-knowledge. It is the path that awakens consciousness. It is the path that allows man to advance and at the same time decipher his past. The relativity of free will. In the minds of some evolutionists, man moves along a single axis and does not understand that moving forward is as relative as moving backward. While these concepts may clash with the extremely geometric minds of some occultists, they should be easily clarified when we think in terms of relativity. If the divine plan is always fulfilled and yet human free will remains the cornerstone of this very divine plan, what human consciousness has been doing is traversing, along the already laid out lines of the divine plan, a free path within the great space of probability predisposed by the will of God. It is up to human consciousness to choose the path that was already previously traced as a possibility by the divine plan, and yet the origin and the goal are the same. God has emanated all existing things in such a way that they might return to him after having traversed his domains. And we must clarify these words even further, because when we speak of divine domains and make a distinction between God and his domains, we must not imply that they are separate objects. The domains are part of God. We only need to define that one part of God is the origin and another part of God is his domains. For man is born in God, walks and evolves in God, and is headed toward God. And because man lives in God, he is a creator, and as he walks his path, he condenses the lines that were previously only possibilities within the divine plan, thereby enriching the visible creation and leaving to future generations, for an indefinite future, the work of continuing to realize the remaining possibilities that the divine plan has laid out since the beginning of time. Humanity as a whole has been tracing its own path, leaving clues and footprints in the consciousness and flesh of all beings living today, and the same impulse that initiated the movement of those first human beings today moves, motivates, and drives those of the present. The direction of history has been traced by the immediate past, but human free will takes up the impulse, responds to internal stimuli, and redefines the direction. Herein lies the miracle of free will, the wonderful sovereignty of man over his own consciousness, a sovereignty that perhaps until today has been exercised in a naive and even childish manner. But when the moment of spiritual maturity arrives, it will be part of the wonders of the human race and will allow man to quicken his pace, glimpsing the future more clearly and without hesitation. The mysteries. Meditate on the mystery contained within a divine plan that respects free will. Meditate on the mystery of man who, without ever turning back, reaches the point from which he departed. Meditate on the paradox of time, which, traveling in only one direction, departs from and leads to the same point. And once you have immersed yourselves in such unfathomable mysteries, expand your consciousness to include within yourselves the beginning and end of all that exists. Be yourselves the path, and then you will understand that, having departed from God, you never moved away from Him, that walking toward God, you were always at the same distance. Understand that, residing in the divine consciousness, the path of human consciousness has been nothing but the allegorical journey that this small part of you called earthly consciousness has taken through its own domains. If you do this and manage to encompass in a single glance the panorama of humanity's evolution from its beginnings to its end, you will in an instant have traveled the path of return. Chapter 11. Service. Another path of return. The importance of servers. We have much to say about the path of return. All lightworkers are at the point where they have decided to return to the Father through the path of service, the path of surrender, the path of docility to the divine plans. Today, you must become aware that you are our instruments. You have been chosen especially for the strength and the light of your spiritual being. This choice, besides being a privilege, is a heavy responsibility, because the task assigned to each person can only be carried out by them. What each of you leaves undone will remain unfinished. Therefore, take the strength you have, take the energy that emanates from us so that you can fulfill even the smallest details of the Father's will in this present reality you are living. It is certainly true that we need collaborators who strive for perfection, perfection in their spiritual development, perfection in their intellectual development, perfection in their emotional development, perfection in their health, perfection in all their activities. Nevertheless, sometimes they get distracted by the things that happen, as if they forget that they can indeed do it, that they indeed have the light, that they indeed have the strength. Those who work in groups can help one another. Feel a sense of solidarity, feel as one, and act accordingly. What each person thinks, what each person does, has repercussions on the higher bodies of the entire group. It is therefore important to gradually cleanse, to gradually purify one's own thoughts and one's own actions. The best way to serve. I wish to reiterate something truly fundamental for your inner development. It is a matter of not judging. Every time you pass judgment on one of your brothers, you place a stone upon your shoulders, which in the long run can drag you down. Everyone likes to be judged with benevolence. Everyone likes to have their mistakes minimized and their weaknesses forgotten. Learn, then, to do so with others, and that energy of gentleness you emanate toward your brothers is the very same that will return to you. You are deeply concerned about the international situation, relations between nations, injustices, and actions that violate the very rights of man. You are pained by misery, hunger, and war. Well, all of these are transitory situations. From these high spheres, these contingencies are viewed and tolerated based on lessons, based on the path humanity is following in its return to the Father. How much can all the awakened beings of humanity do for these heavy and conflictual situations? Unite your prayers, send that purity of intention, that purity of action, so that this energy flowing within you may reach the minds of those who lead the nations, enabling them to resolve and mitigate all these sorrowful situations. Being conscious of what we are. As you travel the paths of your lives, fulfilling your obligations, going about your occupations, let every step be like planting a seed in the earth, a seed of peace, of light, of gentleness, and of love. Were you fully aware of what your mission means, of what your life means, every beat of your heart would be a pulse of energy toward all of creation. Grow, then, in this consciousness. Penetrate deeper and deeper into what it means to live, what it means to draw breath, what it means to breathe to the very rhythm of the breath of the stars. Become aware of your wondrous spiritual self, immense and majestic, complete, full of love, full of intelligence and wisdom, yet shrouded in many clouds, in many layers of materiality. That being has sufficient strength and energy to break through all those surrounding barriers and show its own fullness to all of creation. And the only one who can emerge and transmute all of their matter is each person within themselves. It is a work from the inside out. No one can do this work for you. We ourselves respect your processes and your decisions, so it is in your hands to grow internally, to transcend the limits of your materiality, to transmute it, and to live as what you truly are, higher spirits, endowed with all the strength and light that come from the solar logos. Become aware that each passing day is an opportunity to accelerate this process. Do not look back anymore. And if one of your days has perhaps not been so fruitful in the work of your spiritualization, it has already passed, and there is no need for regret, no need to invest energy in things that no longer exist. Keep your gaze forward, take firm steps, and follow the conviction that brings you here. Your decision to be the hands of God working on earth is bearing fruit. Persist in it, continue with enthusiasm, and view everything that happens to you as lessons, as supports to walk faster, to return with more light, so that your service may become more and more fruitful. You are sowers of light, and the fruits you will receive are of light, because that which is sown is that which is reaped. It would be impossible to sow manure and harvest pearls. We trust in you, we are by your side, we watch over you. And as we have told you several times, you need only speak our name 3 times for us to immediately answer your need. Revitalize, then, your faith, strengthen your hope, let your being be flooded with charity, with love, and go out onto the paths of the earth, expanding all this strength and all this light. I send you a very special blessing, so that through the contemplation of these words you may take heart once more and continue carrying out your own work of transmutation and your service to all your brothers. End of the book, The Path of Return.